Hello YouTubers, this is the noobifier and welcome to what I think has turned out to be a very interesting video. A no bullshit breakdown of ship creation from concept to flight. Today I'll show you the key design stages used by CIG from concept art to final flyable asset. This is a lot of subject matter and there's a ton of invested time and research. If you like it, I would really appreciate you dropping a comment and sharing it with your orgmates. Let's begin. The terms we hear CIG using to describe the game development stages are quite familiar within the industry. CIG sometimes has a more specific meaning in-house for most of them. This is a basic overview and I need to say that the subject matter presented here is much more complex than my goal here today. The ship design starts as an idea, otherwise known as a concept. This is the first step in what's called a pipeline. The role of the ship needs to be defined before anything else happens. With the role, the capability, approximate size, manufacturer and other key factors are decided by the design team. It's at this time where the basic shape and style will also be decided. CIG now uses ship company style guides that define the look and feel of a particular company. The style guide would include logos, markings, textures, fonts, color palettes, and unique design features such as thruster placements or lights. The basic concept will hit the artist, who will draft up a series of evolving sketches. The interior and the exterior are fleshed out until ultimately approved by Chris Roberts. To me, this level of detail is one of the things that sets starcitizen apart. The exterior is never the only concern. The whole ship is being designed so that it could actually be built and function. This is key for the future of the ship function and the game mechanics. The crew is going to need to be able to service the equipment, manage the cargo, fight and live aboard these ships. It's also at the concept art phase that some of the key features are envisioned. The design guides for each manufacturer have evolved over the years, making it easier to actually identify ships based on their unique design cues. RSI ships have blocky square lines and have cockpits that are built with bars and flat glass. Drake has exposed pipes and looks very industrial in function. Origin uses domed cockpits, smooth lines, and perfect fit and finish. Often at this time, the artist will use a style guide in conjunction with the existing fleet, new objects, and additional stock images for inspiration. Animals, fighter jets, sports cars, textures, whatever can be exploited. This is all used to inspire the final designs that we've grown to expect from starcitizen. So now that the art is done, it's time to work out the design document and basic design model. This document is the final description, statistics, some lore, and art that we see on concept. The follow-up Q&A will further define the role and capability of the new craft. Even after the Q&A, there are expected changes as the ship grows up. Some of the older ships became much larger, but on the whole, the core capabilities set out in this design document are retained throughout the development. Now onto the white box. This is where the basic size and shape of the asset is defined. The ship store page has a rough asset for us to visualize, but it's obviously not very detailed. This stage also ensures that the metrics make sense, so that there's enough room for the pilot to fit without clipping. Space for the landing gear, ship systems, components, weapons, doors, and ramps. This stage ensures that minimal adjustments will need to be made in the future gray box. The gray box. Expanding on the white box, this is where the real detail replaces the placeholders. This is where the model gets the fine details it needs to exist in the persistent universe. The gray box can once again result in size adjustments as clearances are finalized. However, because of the white box process, these are normally very minor. Some ships, such as the Caterpillar, are fully modular. Special consideration would need to be taken to ensure that the starting module template would work for all and future requirements. We clearly saw this between the first and second episodes of Ship Shape dealing with the Caterpillar. The basic layout was set in white box where the elevated walkway was midship. Later in gray box, we saw that the gangway was moved over to accommodate taller cargo and optimize how they meant to approach the ship's systems. This change probably set the design team back a couple months, but I think you'll agree it was a good change. This change will allow us to put tall items in and possibly small ships in the sections. This change also refined the locations for the ceiling-mounted ship systems within the Caterpillar. You could clearly tell that the designers were careful to consider how we would interact with these systems in-game. All these steps are critical for the future animations to look right. Another example of this future-proof thinking was the reworked Connie Mark IV. The ship was first split into 4 unique sections. The metrics of the base sections were adjusted to ensure that they would be suitable for all current and future variations of this hull. I thought that this was a very cool idea. By defining and locking down the hull into sections, artists are now able to create entire modules more easily. This method was also recently demonstrated with the Cutlass update. There was a deliberate mention that when designing the Cutlass Black assets, consideration was always taken to the future work on the red and the blue. The base black would be able to have sections removed and replaced, resulting in a red and a blue. I actually like this idea also because it means that the future replication of effort would be avoided. After the gray box, this asset is ready for final art and tech design. The final high texture detail, lighting, shading, and animation. This is where the components that make up the asset come to life. The function and feel of the asset is defined here by the artist and animators. The game engine is programmed to handle how light is cast off of various surfaces and textures. It's still up to the artist to define the surface and fine-tune the results. The game engine is also designed to work and manage the complex animations. The animations are added by breaking certain components away from the main model and then defining the motions based on a hierarchy. This is true for thrusters, wings, seats, and doors. Basically, any moving component on the model have to be done this way. Just a cool note, we just had a demonstration of the hex code-based customization system. You'll be able to quickly customize not only the color, but the texture and reflection of objects in Star Citizen. None of this would be possible without the backbone or core systems within the modified CryEngine. You can see that as the colors and textures are changed, that the engine is able to correctly and realistically render the surface to the viewer. With the asset defined, it's now time to set the level of detail stages or the LOD. The persistent universe will be populated by millions of players and tens of millions of objects. The game engine will decide what needs to be rendered and to what detail based on the code set by the designers. Without this step, we could never achieve a playable universe. I want to use a Borg cube from Star Trek as an example. Up and close, the entire ship is an intricate cluster of pipes and conduits. From very far away, it would simply still look like a big cube. Without the level of detail stages, the system would be forced to render the entire intricate detail all the time, even if the end user wouldn't see the difference. And as you would expect, this load would be compounded as more and more assets are added to the scene. So to mitigate this, the level of detail system has a stepped view threshold. Preset detail levels which the computer can automatically choose from as required by the scene. As you approach or zoom in, the detail would increase. Now the interior has another type of LOD that works when you're both inside and outside of the ship. This one is purely meant to preserve the system resource economy. If you were outside of the ship, there would be no need to render the interior except for the hangar bays and rooms which are visible through the glass. And if you were standing in the mess hall of an Idris, there'd be no need to render the exterior and most of the interior, just the room that you're in. The level of detail economy would add and subtract components as they're needed. As you approach the door to the corridor, the system would load up the walls and floors and the NPCs needed for the next step. As you cross the door threshold into the corridor, the door behind you closes and the system would start to remove the previously needed assets, keeping the system in balance. This system allows us to run very resolute and very massive models in very high frame rates. These steps are there to use the system resources economically. Just the right balance between detail and visual fidelity. When done correctly, the user will never notice the two systems working. This is how the seamless nature of Star Citizen is possible. Alright, so we're almost there. Hangar Ready is the first time the citizens can actually access the ship. The Hangar Model is the state where the ship geometry, level of detail steps, texture, and basic animations are all worked out. The player can interact with it in engine and check out what's been done to date. The damage states are done after the Hangar release. This is the process of procedurally breaking up the ship, which I find quite funny because so much effort has been put into building it so far. Normally in a video game, there are some very basic states. The model gets a little bit darker and damaged, explodes into various poly shapes, and then moves away and eventually fades out to keep the frames high. Star Citizen has pushed the bar way up by modeling the exterior and interior to include the functional components. There are many unique signs of damage depending on the type of weapon that was used. Components will glow and melt for energy weapons, but they could be punctured by physical weapons. Eventually the object would receive so much damage that you can see through it and that it falls off. One important thing to note is that the damage states would also need to have their own level of detail levels. And of course, making this even more complex, the damage states also take out different ship components. On to the flight model. The flight model is where the physicalized mass, calculated thrust, coolers, shields, weapons, countermeasures, and animations all come together. The values and rates are tested and adjusted to an initial balance. Specialized purpose ships such as the Starfarer require even more back-end work to be done. In this case, we have a flyable Starfarer, but we're waiting on the fuel gameplay to be able to use it as intended. In a couple of patches, we're going to see cargo, bounty hunting, and trade gameplay introduced into the persistent universe. In closing, I found this process very interesting. It's much more complex than I originally thought. Creating a ship is a series of codependent steps that take a wide range of specialties to produce to this level. So there you have it. If you liked my take on this subject, I would very much appreciate you passing it on to your friends or orgmates. If you liked my no bullshit approach, please subscribe for more and help me get the word out about Star Citizen. A reminder that there's currently a giveaway funded by my patron backers right now, ending on the 2nd of December 2016. The prize is an LTI Banu merchantman, a great ship that could turn out to be the jack of all trades. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch my content. Fly straight, and I'll see you in the verse.